we're with Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, and Senator, this extraordinary story. You were on break and you met with a homeless fellow and spent a day with him. Can you tell us how that came about, what provoked doing that, and then I'd like to get into the details of what you learned from it.
Yeah, we've had some really disturbing trend lines in Connecticut. Homelessness has been increasing as our technical unemployment rate has been going down, and in a high-cost state, it's not a surprise. Housing just costs a lot more, and so somebody that's been on a flat income for 10 years eventually can't continue to pay their mortgage and their rent, in addition to all the other inflationary increases in the cost of living. And so we just have more people out in the street than we had last year. New Haven, where I was, we had about 750 homeless this year, and we had 650 last year. And that's not the story that people think is happening in our economy today. So, there's only so much you can learn about what it's like to be homeless when you're, reading briefing papers or sitting around a conference table. And so I called up the local homeless shelter and I said, can you find a guy who'd be willing to just spend the day with me to, show me what it's like to walk out of the homeless shelter at 7:30 in the morning and try to stay warm for the entirety of the day in the middle of December. And I did that. I used a pseudonym for the guy that I went with. I used the name Nick. But it's a pretty dehumanizing existence just to do it for a day. When your entire life is built around staying warm and trying to apply for jobs, when your address is a homeless shelter, I wouldn't have wanted to do it for more than the 10 or 12 hours that I did it, but it certainly brings me a newfound sense of mission to try to get these guys off the street.
Yeah, well, you mentioned that one of Nick's biggest challenges, he had a job for many years. He didn't have a job now. And one of his biggest challenges in trying to get a job was that he didn't have a permanent address.
Yeah, this is, Nick is an example of the new homeless in the sense that he's 40 years old and he's never been homeless in his life. He's made some bad personal decisions in his life, but a lot of us have. But he's always been employed. He lost his job over the course of the spring, couldn't find another one, ran through his savings, ran through the good graces of his girlfriend and his relatives, and was out on the street for the first time in his life. And he's got skills. He's got a work history. But when you don't have a car and when you have to list your address as the Columbus House Homeless Shelter, and when there's a long list of other applicants who have cars and who have homes, you are not first on the list to get an interview. And he's just in a real tough space because he tells me he's in a catch-22. He can't get a job if he doesn't have a home, and he can't get a home unless he has a job. And he wonders how on earth he's ever going to get out of this cycle that he's found himself in 40 years into his life. It's not an easy place to be, and it just is a reminder as to why our policy should be to prevent homelessness, that we should do everything possible to stop somebody from getting into that position. And we're certainly not living up to that right now.
Well, which raises two questions. A, how does this happen in the richest nation on earth? And how do we get out of this?
Yeah, it happens because, we have an economy that's recovering only for a small percentage. That the reality is that folks have been, hanging on for a long time in jobs that don't pay what they used to, with hours that are greatly declined. Frankly, Tom, a lot of the people that are at this homeless shelter are actually working. Yeah. They just can't continue to work only 20 hours a week and pay rent in Connecticut. But for this guy, how do we allow this to happen? Well, part of it is that we cut off people's unemployment benefits, and that lifeline allows them to continue to stay housed, continue to pay their bills while they're unemployed, which allows them to look for work. And by cutting off people's unemployment benefits, as we are threatening to do, as we have done and are threatening to continue to do, it basically just guarantees that another several thousand people across Connecticut and the Northeast will find themselves out in the street and will get in that cycle of never being able to find another job.
They get thrown into that catch-22 loop that Nick found himself in.
Yeah, and Nick and his friends, they look at the fact that there are folks that are living very well in Connecticut. I mean, Connecticut has the biggest disparity between rich and poor in the entire nation. We've got folks living in Fairfield County who are pulling in huge incomes, who are paying record low tax rates. And then just down the street in places like Bridgeport and New Haven, you've got entire communities of hundreds of young men and women living out on the streets. There's just a fundamental unfairness in our economy right now that has to be corrected some way or another, or our entire economy will ultimately collapse because we have nobody left to buy the things that the top 1, 2, 3, 4% of Americans are producing.
Yeah, it seems. Franklin Roosevelt made the comment that the best welfare program is a job, and he said, when capitalism fails, when it has its periodic hiccups, and capitalism goes through those cycles where it does, that it was the obligation of government to step in and provide people with jobs if the system wasn't, if the economy as a whole wasn't. We maintained that for quite a while. I mean, Eisenhower with the National Highway System, there have been a lot, arguably even Reagan with Star Wars. I mean, there have been a lot of times when the economy has been stimulated by significant government spending during times of recession. Where are we at now with that concept of the government as employer of last resort rather than as just giver of the social safety net? Is that even a debate anymore?
I'm not sure that it is. I mean, you have a strain of the Republican Party that runs the House of Representatives just down the hall from us that really believes that the mission of Congress is to eliminate government from every corner of our lives. And we're now arguing over something that we never thought was a debate. I mean, we always agreed that the government at least had the obligation to run good schools and to invest in science, America's competitive edge, and build roads and rails. And now we're even debating that basic function of government, never mind whether government should step in at times of severe economic distress and employ people. It's a really sad time in a lot of ways to be here because we're having new debates that we've never seen before. The fact is that we didn't do enough government stimulus, that we have rail accidents happening at a near record rate in the Northeast because we've allowed for our infrastructure to atrophy, and there are people sitting on the sidelines of the economy that are ready to go to work and rebuild those rail lines that will give them jobs and make everybody who rides them safer. It's a win-win. It to a lot of us seems like a pretty easy solution to the travails of someone like Nick who would take one of those jobs. But right now, with the Republicans that run the House of Representatives, they won't even hear the beginnings of that argument.
Yeah, which is very unfortunate. Last week, I walked out of the offices of the studio where we do the show, and there was I don't know if he was homeless or not, but there was a guy standing there on the street who said, would you buy me lunch? Would you buy me a meal? And I didn't know what to say. What's the appropriate response to that? I mean, there's this awful conflict of, I don't want to pay this guy to be here every day, and on the other hand, if this is a genuinely needy person,
yeah.
I mean, how do Americans deal with this?
Listen, I don't want to take too much away from my one-day experience of living the life of someone who's homeless, but I got to talk to a lot of guys who just spend their days down in the New Haven Green. None of them want to be there. There's not a single one of them that is accepting a handout that becomes a justification to remain homeless. Listen, there are some guys who are homeless and who have drug habits and are using some amount of money that they may collect either through charity or through the government to feed that habit, but that is a pretty small percentage, especially during these days where these folks are dealing with temperatures that could kill a man or a woman living on the street. It probably all behooves us to lend a little additional helping hand. Most of these guys who ask you for money for food, guess what? They're using it for food.
They actually need it.
Yeah.
That's again, that sad commentary on what's going on in the United States.